Hey, I bring you greetings on behalf of all of those churches, as Dan said, across BC. I have this really unique privilege of the role that I have now. It's a unique thing in that for 30 plus years, I kind of did what Dan and Brad and Nate do. And that is I pastored churches, or a few churches over the years, and I absolutely loved every second of it. I really did. I mean, there were some times that I didn't like it at all. But generally speaking, I liked most of it, almost all of it. But God really blessed me some very unique experiences and get to know great people all over the ministries that I've been able to serve at. But one of my favorite parts about doing this role that I do now is I get to spend time and hang out with pastors like yours. And I appreciate, let me just tell you this, I brag about you specifically. I've bragged about Fort George on a fairly regular basis. All across BC, in fact, even a little bit into Alberta and other places as I get the opportunity to visit. And I appreciate the integrity. Did you get that this morning? Did you get the sense of the integrity here? I appreciate it so much. On top of that, folks, listen, you have the best looking pastors around. Come on. Oh, it's just fantastic to be with you. I'm so grateful to be with you. I want to just say, of course, I bring you greetings on behalf of all the other churches across BC. Did you know you're a part of something much bigger than yourself? Really. It's really cool. Very, very cool. In fact, I believe that God is actually starting a movement. See, we serve a God who is always moving. God is never stationary, right? God never says, hey, come over here and let's stand still together. He says, why don't you come over here and let's move. I'm going to go this way, and I'd like you to come with me. And here's the incredible news. This is happening in our churches in BC. We're seeing a movement of God that we have not seen in 30 plus years of my ministry. We're seeing things that I've not seen before, where God is saying, come on with me, and people are going, yes, I'd like to do that. Part of it is starting here in Prince George. You've been doing some amazing things. I had the privilege of coming up for your Good Friday service this last year. And it was at the high school gym or auditorium, and just had what an amazing opportunity and privilege to be here to worship with you guys in that. That was an incredible experience for 800 or something plus people, across Prince George in the area. Coming to that was a beautiful thing. So I bring you greetings from all your sister churches. They are grateful for you. They pray with you, and they pray for you for what God wants to do. If you have a Bible or you're using an app, whatever it is you're going to use, I would encourage you to turn to Romans chapter 12. This is one of the most familiar verses, a couple of the most familiar verses that you will have heard or that you know in Scripture. If you've been a follower of Jesus for a long time, maybe you've been following ever since you can remember, or even relatively recently, these are verses you've heard before. You've heard guys like me or Dan, we've talked about these kinds of verses or these specific verses many times over the years. Chapter 12, verse 1 and 2. Therefore, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you'll be able to test and improve what God's will is, His good, His pleasing, and His perfect will. Now notice when you read those first two verses of chapter 12. The first word we read in this translation anyway is the word therefore. Whenever you see the word therefore in front of any verses, you ask yourself this question: what is it there for? It's very important. See, what he's saying is this: all the stuff that I've written in the first 11 chapters, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to call you to that kind of life. And here's the thing, folks. It's a life that's built on something. It's built on something lasting. It doesn't come out of nowhere. He says it's rooted in something. It's rooted in something that is deep, strong, that is sound. What's it rooted in? God's mercy. Interesting thing about God's mercy. In the original language, when it says God's mercy, it's actually plural. In other words, it's God's mercies. In other words, vast mercies to you and I. It's not singular. See, God's mercy is what Paul wants to say. It perfectly sums up the truth of God. It really does. And his relationship with us through Jesus in the first 11 chapters of Romans. That's what he's saying. So listen again, with that in mind, to verse 1. Therefore, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. So as we begin today, and despite the risk of oversimplifying these incredible words of this incredible text of Scripture, let me attempt to give you an 8-word summary, and it's just a Dave summary. That's all it is of the first 2 verses. Your entire life should be a living sacrifice. Oh, sound like a big deal? It is. Sound easy? It is not. I mean, honestly, ask yourself the question, what kind of life do I need to live if it's going to constantly be one of sacrifice? You know, if you ask almost anyone what they think of religion, they'll say something like this: it's a belief system, or it's a particular way of living. And they wouldn't be that far off, actually. You practice certain practices, you behave in certain ways, right? And it's because of what you believe. But in ancient Rome, where Paul was writing this, and he was writing to this culture and context at the time, religion, that word, was thought in more in terms of a sacrifice. That's how they thought of the word religion. They associated it immediately with that. See, religion in those days was about trying to make things right. And you did that by offering a sacrifice. You do the right thing to please the right God, or gods as it were, and you do it in the right way, no excuses at all. And you see, the thing is, it's really not that different back then as to what all religions are after. Religions are after religious behavior for the purpose of wiping my slate clean, man, that's what I want. See, in that case, if making a sacrifice is just simply religious behavior, then that religious behavior lacks depth, doesn't it? It lacks substance. It's kind of hollow. It's empty. See, just like Paul talks about in the first half of Romans, the first 11 chapters, that's what empty religion does, but it's not what Jesus does. Jesus says, listen, you don't have to offer sacrifices to make up for your sins anymore. Jesus did it once and for all. It is final. Not going to happen again. Does not have to happen. See, if a quick sacrifice wipes my slate clean, totally, what's my motivation to avoid the bad decision the next time? See, what can happen is it easily can just become an abuse, really, of the system of sacrifice. What it comes down to is this: that a sacrifice without the right attitude or heart posture behind it, intention, it's a hollow gesture. Because it's based on an action, it's not based on something actually meaningful. So, in view of all that God has done, His mercies, we offer a sacrifice. But it'll be a just different kind of sacrifice than the kind we get at first glance. The sacrifice will be us. The sacrifice will be me. It'll be a living sacrifice. You see, because what we find is that a life of sacrifice starts with a sincere heart. Now notice, I didn't say it flows out of what we say. I didn't say it flows out of what we do, or even how we say or how we do it. See, Paul wants us to know this is the thing that pleases God. Key thing there, okay? This is the thing that pleases God. See, if you give something away that you have no stake in or no connection to, it doesn't cost you anything. It's not a sacrifice. At best, it's convenient, but it's impersonal. It's the same as an act of sacrifice that comes from an insincere heart. See, the one thing it isn't is worship. A few weeks ago, I was visiting with one of your fellow pastors, your sister pastors, who is in Kamloops. And he gave me a definition of worship. He's actually a very studied theologian. And so almost anything he says, I go, okay. And he says, here's a good definition of worship that I think I've been wrestling through. He says, it's really simple. All of me for all of him. And I think that's pretty good. See, I think that's what Romans 12, verses 1 and 2 are talking about for you and I. Now, there's something really significant in verse 1. Before Paul describes this life of sacrifice as being merciful to others, which is really important, the rest of chapter 12 is filled with that. It's amazing. Before he says that, though, he describes it as something. He describes it as worship. Now, see, being a follower of Jesus is more than being merciful to people. It has everything to do with being worshipful to God. Listen to this again. Offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. In other words, listen, folks. In view of God's mercy, your sincere sacrifice offered to him needs to be done before we focus on our mercy. Does that make sense? Before we focus on our being merciful to others, we give ourselves away in worship to God. See, a life of sacrifice is first and foremost a response to God in worship. Now, this is really big. Yet it might be fair to say, I think that we miss this. I miss this all the time. If you're a follower of Jesus, then this is actually specifically for you. We can never let ourselves drift into mere social agenda. Now, I say the word mere social agenda carefully because if God is left out, that's what our mercy will be. It'll just be social agenda. Now, that's still good. There's nothing wrong with that. And if you're not yet a follower of Jesus, I would encourage you to say, yes, absolutely, keep offering mercy to others. Absolutely, keep doing good. Keep doing justice, right? But here's the thing, what Paul wants us to know. It can be so much more than just that. See, it's a beautiful thing for anybody to give the hungry something to eat, absolutely. But how much more beautiful is it knowing that when you do it, it's because you decided, you understood that God said they were worthy of his mercy long before you thought they were. See, Jesus followers show mercy out of the value that they see in others because of the value God gave them. It's not your perception of them, it's God's. Put it this way, the things we do, the sacrifices that flow out of a sincere heart, those are an expression of God's worth. See, it's why Fort George wants really so desperately to serve the people of Prince George. That's why those Christmas trees are in the back. You want to serve the people of Prince George. But see, if all the ways that we describe, or that we sacrifice our time and our energy, our resources, if they're not an act of worship first, then in the end, we might not have actually even been merciful. See, we serve not that we can be seen, but so others can see Jesus. The defining characteristic, folks, of a Jesus follower is a life of worship so that it can be merciful. If we're not worshiping in our behavior, that is, if God's mercies to us in the gift of Jesus that we've received, if they don't go hand in hand with our behavior, then we're not giving people what they actually need the most. See, the mercy of God is just this relentless pursuit of his people, both when they need him and when they even think they don't. It's what followers of Jesus have experienced before they even started to become followers of Jesus. See, that's God's mercy. It inspires us, it motivates us, drives us to live a life where now sacrifice is now becoming an act of everyday worship. It's who we are, it's what we do. It's so much more, guys, than what we do in a weekend. It's not about that one great song that the team transported us into to create just this right worship mood. It's more than a one-sentence prayer at night with the kids before they go to bed, or that quick word before you grab a bite. See, a living sacrifice, says Paul, it carries this posture. It's different. Throughout the day, and it's actually tuned into the very same things that God is tuned into. See, it's more than a moment. Worship is more than a song. It's more than a prayer. It is who you and I are all the time. That's what the Apostle Paul wants us to know. There have been times in my life when I've said to God, I can't, God. I can't. That's too hard. That thing that's going on, that thing that happened last week, or the thing that happened, 6 months ago that's still floating in my brain and it's taking up way too much space. God, I just can't give that up. Have you ever said that to God? Intentionally or even subconsciously? Maybe it was that time you were wrestling through, that issue. The one that you just can't or couldn't get a handle on. You can't get victory over this one thing. And so you said to God, I can't. Or maybe it was just following through and doing the right thing. You knew you were supposed to do it. But you struggled to go all the way. And so you said to God, I can't. See, it can be so hard, right? Almost impossible. Every moment of every day. God, are you serious? I mean, you don't know what my workplace was like, God. My boss. It's not even that I don't think they like me. I don't think they like any human being that walks on the face of the earth. I can't. God, I can't. Living with my family? God, are you kidding? They're a hot mess. It's impossible to get along with anybody in my family. God, I can't. God, but my friends, come on, God. They won't understand. They're so persuasive, They don't get what I stand for. God, I can't. You know what? I've learned something about myself. It might be true about you as well. Most of the time when I've said those words to God, I can't, it usually means I won't. Some of us don't even actually let it get to that point of saying I won't, because before we even let it get there, we decide, I'm not even going to try. I think if we cut right to the heart of the problem, we find that the heart is the problem. When we let other things take a priority over God, those things become the most important things to us right here. Remember the first commandment of the Big Ten? You shall have no other gods before me. Exodus 20. Jesus addressed this principle regularly. He specifically, it came when he was dealing with the everyday kind of stuff of life. In Mark 7:21, he said, out of man's hearts, and then he listed, comes a whole bunch of stuff. You see, in those moments, you and I have a choice. We have a choice. We can live moment by moment, day by day. And we can decide, by our choice, to make our life be an act of worship. Now let me get super practical here just for a minute. Parents, let me ask you a question. What would your relationships with your kids look like? If when you were with them, when you were talking with them, you treated those conversations as an act of worship, honoring to God. Students, hey, do you think your homework would be nearly as hard as if when you sat down you said, God, I'm going to give it my best shot, and I'm doing it for you? Would conflict in your relationships be easier or harder if you realigned how you talk and you determined that the actual words you said were going to be words that were acts of worship, honoring to God? You see, every single part of our day, guys, can be an act of worship that pours right out of a sincere heart. And the struggle can be so immense. But if there's one thing that life teaches, when we don't worship and honor God in all we do, we will worship something or someone else. And that we do, despite that there's only one who's worthy of all of our worship. That's what a life of sacrifice is about. relinquishing my desire to do my own thing, and then to present that as an offering to God, a living sacrifice. Now, Romans 2 of chapter 12 is one of the most quoted verses in the entire Bible, but we should never read it without reading chapter 1 first, because it's all about the how. So we're going to read verse 1 and 2 again. I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. Verse 2. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. This is why verse 1 and 2 of Romans chapter 12 are just so amazing, because verse 2 is the how to verse 1. Now, the word conform in our English language is an important one here. It's the word that we get our English word for scheme from. We all know what a scheme is, right? A scheme is that thing that it's about being perceived in a certain way. We change the look on the outside. We scheme. We think we want people to be perceiving things a certain way, but we don't really worry about what's behind it. But it also means this, not just scheme, it means this word too, fashioned. So in other words, you put those things together, and what you get, what Paul is saying is, don't allow yourself to adopt what looks good on the outside and fashion this image and perfection, whatever that is, that's just focused on the outside stuff. You know, I remember a long time ago, I was suffering from one of those pastoral nights, insomnia. Couldn't sleep. I don't know what it was, and this was a long time ago. When you'd go, that's kind of my age. You'd go and you'd turn on the TV, 2 in the morning. It's like, I'm not sleeping, and I got to fill my mind with something else. So I turn on the TV, and it was an infomercial. Do you guys know what those are? Young people? No. Oh, yes, you guys know? Infomercial. And it was an amazing thing. I was mesmerized by this infomercial. I brought something to show you here. The guy on this infomercial was selling one of these. 2 of them, pardon me. They come in pairs. Anybody know what these are? Yeah, these are push-up helpers. And I watched this guy, I'm telling you, man, for an hour. He was totally ripped. And I thought to myself, I could look like that. And fortunately, common sense took over, and I went back to bed and had a good sleep. But as it happens, a few years later, I was with my wife in a thrift store, and on the clearance shelf, which probably should have been my first clue, I saw these babies for $1. They were $1. It was not 3 easy payments of $39.99. And so, of course, I bought them. And I want to tell you, I used them faithfully for at least 2 or 3 push-ups. Have you tried these things? They are so hard. I'm not even kidding. I did find a really neat use for them, though, that when you're watching the game at night and you're sitting on the couch, you stick it between the couch cushions like this, and you put a plate of nachos on there. I mean, that one with the cheese on the other side, it's right there, man. Just turn it there. And by the way, I can see the look on some of your faces right now. You're judging me. And I just want to mention and perhaps remind you of that Suzanne Summers Thighmaster of a few years ago. You know that Stairmaster Pro that's going to turn everything into incredible fitness that's folded up in your closet on the shelf? Yeah, don't forget about that stuff. Here's the thing, folks. We spend a lot of time, don't we, trying to conform the outside, trying to change the outside to make sure that it looks okay, the external stuff. Making sure that what everybody else thinks is important, at least what we think everyone else thinks is important, becomes a priority for us. Students, do you guys get caught up trying to keep up? You got enough likes, followers, TikTok, Instagram? Maybe you're a young mom. Maybe you feel all the pressure to be just right up there with all the other young moms and what other young moms are doing, the kind of stuff they're doing, how they act, where they go. See, the problem, folks, is for us thinking, I want people to see me this way, when it really only matters that God sees you His way. See, woven through the first 11 chapters of Romans, Paul tells us all about God's mercies, remember, plural. And he clarifies not only who He is, but this is just as important, who you are because of Him. Listen to some of those incredible truths. And they're found in some of the earlier chapters of Romans. Romans 3:23, familiar verse. It basically says, it doesn't matter how good you are at sacrificing for other people. It says this, all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. You're never going to be good enough. Romans 5:8 says that God's mercy was shown to us in how much He loved us. It says this, God showed His great love for us by sending Christ to die for us. When? While we were still sinners. I didn't achieve anything before Jesus said, you're worth it. You see God's mercies in chapter 10, verse 9. It says this, if you openly declare that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised Him from the dead, you will be saved. Guys, this is incredible stuff. See, God's mercies. Those are the things that make me who I am. Nothing else. Paul is saying we're not defined by our performance, your talents, your gifts, all those sweet skills that you have. Yes, good, they're great, but God's kindness, God's mercy, those are the things that make you who you are. Who I am is built on what is done in and through me because of Jesus. Here's, I think, why it's really dangerous for us to define ourselves on anything other than the mercies of God. And the first reason I'll just give you is a really practical one. When all those things we're clinging to, when they disappear, and they always do, we're left with nothing. And so then we're focused to what? Define ourselves by the next thing that we think is important. You and I see this all the time in our world right now. We're defining ourselves by the next thing. And then the next thing, because the things that we're clinging to disappear. But let me give you the other reason that I think it's really dangerous. And actually, I think it's really the only reason we need to really be aware of. When we define ourselves by anything other than Jesus, we begin to hold on to those things so tightly that whether they pass away or not, it becomes incredibly difficult to let them go. See, living the sacrificial life that God asks is impossible when we're more worried about conforming the outside and making sure we look good than transforming the in. Now, I said earlier the words scheme and fashioned, they come from the same word that Paul used for conform. You know what another English equivalent for transform that we read here is? Metamorphosis. It's that process of change that starts where? On the inside. See, a life of sacrifice is marked by transformation, is what he wants to say, on the inside. That's where it begins. Now, an interesting fact about transformation. While it always starts on the inside, where does it always show up? Oh, on the outside. Paul is brilliantly showing us that to be a living sacrifice, it flows out of a sincere heart. It is an everyday act of worship, and it doesn't conform to what just looks good on the outside, but he's saying it is transformed on the inside. See, the transformation is what he's talking about. It's the result of everything else that preceded it. It's about what God has done for you and I in the past. But now, and this is really what Paul wanted us to know, really, it's what he continues to do now inside of us. This is incredible news. The New Living Translation says this way: let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. Now, don't let the first word of that verse slip by. Let. We don't need to spend a lot of time going over the deep original Greek meaning of the word let. Let God do the transformation in you. I think that Eugene Peterson was quoted earlier in the Message Paraphrase Bible. Says it this way, I really like it. God brings out the best in you. That's so good. See, this is a big part of our role in the process of transformation. We actually actively decide to let God do the transformation. To let God transform us into a new person. It's actually what it all comes down to. My letting God transform me. You know, when I was a little guy, I remember very well my dad. He passed away a number of years ago. We were close, great relationship. He had a strong old German guy. This is the background I come from. And, you know, in his era, they were tough as nails. I mean, they didn't, from about my generation on, they didn't make them the same. Just so strong. I remember working on the farm. My dad was a businessman at first, a contractor, and then he got tired of the business world, and he was about 60, and he retired, sold all that stuff, and then bought a farm because he thought that would be easier. You know, that's the kind of guy, right? I remember I was about 10, 12 years old, and at that age, you knew how to drive a stick shift because that's just how it was. And I had to drive, it was my job to drive Dad out, to drive coffee and snacks and lunch break and coffee break. He was pretty meticulous about that stuff. Take a 15-minute coffee and then a 30-minute lunch and then a 15-minute coffee, you know, that kind of thing. And I remember it was about 35 degrees and it was middle of the day in middle of July and it was just sweltering hot. My dad, he was so strong. Hot coffee, didn't matter. I remember him pouring that thermos as I took it out there to him, and I see that steam coming. I mean, steam shouldn't be able to be visible when it's 35 degrees. That was so hot, and I'd watch him, and I'd be looking at him going, is he really gonna? And he would take that coffee, and he would hold it up there, and he would drink it all. I mean, he was just one of these guys. It was just impossible to knock him down. Later in his life, he got cancer. And just a few years after that, he got cancer. And the doctors said, you got about 5 years. And my dad, I remember looking at the doctor saying, I don't think so. And my dad, you know, lived another 15 or 20. He was just so strong and so determined. I actually thought my dad at some points could do anything. He was really capable of that. On his deathbed, I was in his hospital room and I was holding his hand. And he was physically, very clearly, just moments away from breathing his last breath. And I held his hand and I said, how are you doing, Dad? And he looked over at me and he goes, not bad. You know what else I remember about my dad? He took God's word and he said, this is the most important thing to me. I remember every night as I walked up to my bed, walking by my dad's bedroom, and he'd be on his knees praying for me, praying for my siblings. My dad was really strong, independent, didn't need much from anyone. But he needed his God. And he knew it. And he lived it. We need to have the kind of posture that says, God, I offer myself to you. Doesn't matter how strong I think I am. God, it doesn't matter on the other end of the spectrum how weak I think I am. I offer myself to you. So God, I'm inviting you to transform me. See, our text in Romans chapter 12, verse 1 and 2, when you really dig into it, it's pretty challenging. These are the questions. What are my priorities? Do I align those priorities? Am I aligning those priorities with God's priorities? You know what I think it comes down to? Our posture, our hearts. That posture that says, God, I offer myself to you. See, a life of sacrifice is in fact dependent on our posture. If you're a follower of Jesus, your life should be about something different, folks. What drives you? What motivates you? What guides you? What inspires you? What transforms you? What makes your life a living sacrifice? You were handed a card on the way in. If you weren't handed a card on the way in, I invite you to pick one up on the way out. There's probably lots extra. And this is called a prayer of relinquishment. And I would ask you to consider making this prayer of relinquishment your prayer for the week or two or longer. What I would do is and this is what I did, I'd tape it to my bathroom mirror. Actually, that didn't last long because I never look at myself anymore. I don't have any hair. But stick it to your car visor or wherever it is you're going to see it on the fridge. And every time you see it, just stop and pray this prayer. But I got to warn you, this is a hard prayer. See, if we say it with the posture that we've been talking about, the Apostle Paul was talking about, it's going to be transformative. It will, in fact, change our lives. We will become better followers of Jesus if we actually live this. So I challenge you to do it. So I would say this as we close. I'm going to pray this prayer. And I would ask if you're gutsy enough, as you bow your head, just listen to as I pray. Own this prayer. Make it yours as I pray along. Today, O Lord, I yield myself to you. May your will be my delight today. May your way have perfect sway in me. May your love be the pattern of my living. I surrender to you my hopes, my dreams, my ambitions. Do with them what you will, when you will, and as you will. I place into your loving care my family, my friends, my future. Care for them with a care that I can never give. I release into your hands my need to control, my craving for status, my fear of obscurity. Eradicate the evil, purify the good, and establish your kingdom on earth for Jesus' sake.